problems dealing with radioactivity, such as cancer or genetic health, for so long? How can we trust that anyone will really follow through with this? Bill, Representative Otto, I present this first to you.
So you're going to ask a politician how you can trust government. The first and foremost is what you're doing tonight, without a doubt. Kay has been working on this for years. Has been constantly has been the constant pressure on this, and now you have folks like Don that come up. The Missouri Coalition for the Environment, who I didn't mention earlier, are one of the environmental activist groups that are keeping this in the public eye. And frankly, that's the way you assure that your elected officials are listening to you and respond, is by making sure that they understand that this is your concern. I was asked yesterday by Kevin Killeen, and he's absolutely positive of this. As soon as this fire is dealt with, as soon as it no longer smells in the community, everybody's going to forget. And if you forget, if we forget, if it is not continue to be part of the landscape of where we live and what we do, then that's our failure as a community and a body that elects people every day. So I will tell you, as a freshman legislator, the one thing that surprised me is I do not get that many emails. I don't, and that's a failure too. Email everybody. Keep it a part of the discussions. When you get a survey from Senator Blunt, McCaskill, your state rep or your federal, anybody, always mention the landfill. Keep this, and hold them responsible for you know, the limited things that Representative Ellinger and I can do, but we can respond and we can work and we can help you with that, and that's the best way that we assure the. I don't want to say honesty, but at least they'll keep it where it belongs, and that's in the forefront.
Mr. Drey, would you care now to respond to some of the things that have been commented? And I'd like you particularly to respond to whether or not you think the fire, if it's contained, if that will satisfy the situation. If that can be part of what you would answer here.
Well, my husband, who's retired now, had land in the Missouri Ozarks, and fire breaks do work sometimes, but a lot of times they don't work. And one of the things that's of real concern about West Lake Landfill is if they dig in the ground, then oxygen will have more oxygen will reach the fire, and that's a real concern. But I think, and I hope people will not think, because some of us have used words like isotopes and all, that we know about chemistry and physics and all. I know this much, zero. I wrote a letter to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, I think it was about 100 years ago, and I said, I wrote a lot of questions, and at the end I said, I apologize if I had any mathematical mistakes, but all I had in high school was plain geometry. And my husband read the letter. It had, all my questions were numbered, and he mailed the letter for me, and when he came back, I said, what did you think of my letter? And he said it was a good letter, and he said, that was cute the way you spelled plain geometry, and I spelled, you know, I thought I had plain geometry and other people had fancy geometry. So that's where I started, and I'm not much better than that now. But it is, I think that fire breaks work sometimes and sometimes they don't. But I believe that these materials have spread all over and they're in the groundwater, and if we do not remove these radioactive wastes that have half-lives in the billions of years and hundreds of thousands of years and so on, are we really comfortable leaving this for future generations? And it's just, what I wrote a 14-page paper here that I sent to the EPA, and a whole bunch of people, some of the people here in the audience this evening wrote papers to the EPA, because the EPA initially said all they wanted to do with the radioactive waste at the landfill for which they're responsible, because it's Superfund, all they wanted to do was to cover it with a little bit of clay, some rocks, and some construction rubble, and leave it in the floodplain. and a lot of citizens protested. And I wrote a 14-page paper at that time, and if anyone reads it, they get a quarter, and I've only had, that's what I say with all the things I've written. You have to read them standing up, which I don't think that's a big responsibility, but because you fall asleep otherwise. But I also say, if you finish something I've written, you get a quarter, and in all the like 40 years I've been doing this, I've had to pay like 7 quarters is all, and that's embarrassing. But I have written this long paper about landfills and about why we should not leave these extremely dangerous, explosive, radioactive materials in the floodplain. And I did not mention the possibility of a landfill fire. And in everything I read about West Lake Landfill, no one ever mentioned about landfill fires. And since then, I mean, like I've read a dissertation, a PhD dissertation from England, and they talk about how very common landfill fires are. And by the way, there's been one burning in Ohio in a landfill owned by the same company that owns West Lake Landfill, that's Republic, and it's been burning for 12 years. But landfill fires are not only common, but they're very difficult to put out, and they'll travel way beyond any fire break, and I think it's just terrifying.
Mr. LaVanchy, or officer, what happens to the water? And they're fighting the fire now, right? I mean, is there any water actually going on the fire? So how do they, okay, then you tell us how they're going to put the fire out. The question really was, but take it from here, what happens to the water once it's heated by the fire? I suppose there would be water down there. So it'd either be water from a fire, a charge line, or it would be water, I guess it could be groundwater. But what happens to the water once it's heated up by a fire? And how is there actually, what mechanisms are being used to fight the fire?
Well, I think something that's very critical to understand, Todd will tell you this if he were sitting here, you never extinguish a landfill fire, it eventually burns itself out. Unless it's in an area where you can go in, dig it up, and extinguish it by conventional methods using water. The question about water on the landfill, yeah, there's a lot of water on the landfill. There's a lot more than should be. As landfills decompose, they create juices, and it's called leachate. The landfill in Bridgeton currently is generating 1.3 million gallons of leachate per week. The largest landfill in the state of Missouri, right across Highway 70, creates about 10,000 gallons of leachate per week. So it's an exothermic reaction that's going on. And call it a smoldering event, a fire, whatever, it's giving off heat. And as the process happens with decomposition of these materials, that heat front moves out. And just like in a fire in your fireplace, if you've ever noticed, you see condensation that builds up on the flue, sometimes on the glass window plates that you see there. That's what's happening in this landfill, and it's heading out in all different directions. So what it's doing is it's rapidly decompressing or oxidizing the trash that's there. And as it does that, it creates a condensation front to the point where, and it's kind of hard to follow, but my understanding of it is that if you took a cross section where that smoldering event was at, it just went straight across the landfill and dissected the smoldering event right in half, anywhere from 10 yards to 150 yards out in front of that in the direction the heat's traveling, that would look like a waterfall because of the amount of condensation, the amount of energy that's there. It's a sustained combustion. So what happens is that stuff gets wet, and as the heat continues to affect that and it keeps moving forward, it starts to get dry. So it's oxidized that trash to the point that it's readily combustible. So it's wet at first, just like a log, a green log. If anybody's ever burnt green firewood, you'll see it popping. It's extracting the liquid out of that material, and then eventually it's decomposing it faster than it normally would, making it more readily available as fuel for the fire.
It's in town, right? Yes. Are there contingency plans for emergencies in case something bad does happen, more, you know, beyond what we have today? Or is that something that the county is going to be looking at?
It's my understanding that the Department of Health is looking at contingency plans for this, just as any other situation that could potentially be an emergency. In some respects, I don't feel like I'm qualified sitting next to a first responder to answer that question. But it is something that the St. Louis County Department of Health is looking into. I would like to defer to the chief if I could, just to explain more about for any type of, in other words, typically the county would be responsible for, I don't believe, for contingency plans for a normal fire or something of that nature. This is such a unique situation. I do remember bringing up in a meeting, I said, well, you know, certainly there's got to be some other example in the country of where there is a landfill fire and where is there radioactive material, so what did they do? And I got a bunch of blank stares, and someone finally said, well, there is no other analogous situation. This is the only one we know of. So given that, and maybe the chief can confirm that, it is a very unique situation, and I don't want to pretend that we have some plan that's already in place. It's certainly something that we need to look at as this situation continues to develop.
Yeah, I wish we could say we had a plan in place, but we don't. We don't know what the extenuating circumstances are around the fire or around whatever would happen to have that type of evacuation plan I've heard thrown out there. To be honest with you, the fire department's not going to be doing the evacuation. We're going to be on the fire. And we prepared, worst case scenario, what we feel is that the fire would surface, start the cap that they put down, start that on fire, and we'd be called to respond to extinguish that. So when that happens, and if our hazmat team equipment detects levels of emissions, and I'm talking about toxic emissions, I'm not talking about CO or, and when I say CO, it's carbon monoxide, things like that, they dissipate rather quickly during a fire. And if anybody's ever had a fire in their neighborhood, they can smell the smoke from that fire, whatever. You're not evacuated at that point. You know, you're usually you come to the scene of the fire because you see all the lights and you hear the sirens and you watch and whatever else, but there's not an evacuation in place. But the things that are on this landfill that are being emitted from this smoldering event are a lot different than a house fire. There's benzene, there's cancer-causing materials that are being emitted from this. So if that were to happen, one of the first things that my chief staff has been instructed to do is contact the St. Louis County Hazmat team. Well, guess who that is? We have that equipment to monitor that stuff. So that would be one of the first things we did, even before we start to try to extinguish a surface fire, would be to monitor for the safety of the public. And that's our goal, that's what our role is as a county entity, is to protect the safety of the public.
I'm sure Kay Drey, who has worked for decades on this issue, is very happy to see Dawn, a citizen, step forward, and Bill, a politician, to step forward on this issue. Let me ask Dawn here, how do you see this progressing as a, picking up the sort of role that Kay Drey has performed for many decades here? What do you see the citizens doing? I mean, you want us on your mailing list? Do you want, or how do you see, as a citizen leader, that's why you've been invited here, as a citizen leader, what we can do and what you think we should do to be effective and prudent but effective in pursuing this issue?
So just to clarify, you're talking about elected officials or everyone in this room? Anybody?
Yeah, both.
I'll tell you what, take a look at our community and do what they're doing. The community, like I said, we're stepping up and we're not taking any crap. Sorry, but we're not. when people, and I understand this is a very unique event, it really is, but when I hear people talking about how there's not an evacuation plan and stuff, I get mad. I get real upset. I think that nuclear weapons waste sitting on a landfill, just sitting there on the ground for 40 years, even without a fire, probably there should be some sort of plan somewhere they could pull out, okay? There's a number of things that could happen to that stuff. So first of all, let's get that straight. Even without a fire, there should have already been something in place, okay? There just should have. All right. So you take the fact that there's not, and that should show you there's a huge problem with the understanding of this landfill. Then you add the fire in and earthquakes and all the other stuff. People need to wake up. They heard tonight how far this can travel, what impact. You're talking radioactive particles and smoke, people. It's not like catching the flu. You go outside and you get some of those particles in you, they don't ever leave. It's like asbestos, only it's worse. Okay, U-238, how many millions of years? Billions?
4.5 billion.
4.5 billion.
Half-life.
Half-life.
Multiplied by 10.
So if I breathe in one of those particles, it's going to stay in me even till I die.
But also other daughter products like radium and so forth that will also be generating.
You're talking about particles that are going to stay in you till after you die and you're buried in the ground. They don't leave. They cause cancer. That should be enough to make everybody, even elected officials, wake up. And even if there's no fire, even if this trench gets put in place and it works, okay, I will believe it when I see it. And we are going to see it. This community is going to look that trench over, and we're going to make sure it's done the way, we're going to rely on our first responders. But even if that's done and this fire magically goes out tomorrow, you still have 48,000 tons of nuclear weapons waste sitting in a landfill less than a mile from a school. Come on. That should infuriate everybody. And if that's not enough, it sits, half a mile from the Missouri River? The Missouri River is everybody's problem. It is. So yeah, everybody has the potential for being impacted, and once you realize that, you have a responsibility to do what you can to get it out. You have a responsibility.
All right, thank you. I want to call Ed Smith up. Come on up. Let me introduce Ed. Ed is with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. As far as I know, he doesn't know I'm going to be calling on him. And if you would, because you're not part of the panel, I'd like to give you the microphone, though, simply because I happen to believe that people that are involved in Missouri Coalition for the Environment are pretty knowledgeable people about the environment and about environmental issues. And if you'd like to comment on what you've heard here tonight, and what you think should be done, or take 2 or 3 minutes if you would. We'll let you have the microphone. And you might even tell us a little bit about the Coalition for the Environment. Maybe people would want to join. It's a nonpartisan, non-political, or what should I say, politically neutral. It's not allied with any party. First of all, you're Ed Smith. What do you do, Ed?
I work on energy issues and anything that deals with radioactivity.
Are you full-time with the Coalition?
Yeah, I'm a full-time staffer.
All right, full-time staffer, okay. Okay, we got to talk into the microphones, okay. Ed actually works for the Coalition for the Environment. He's going to say a few words to us about what we're talking about.
I would have dressed up a little if I knew I was going to be called up here. So Drey, she's one of our founding members of the Missouri Coalition for the Environment. We're 44 years young. We have been working on nuclear issues for a while. I started with the Coalition in 2011. That's when I first met Kay, and ever since then we've been standing on her shoulders with the West Lake Landfill, the Callaway Nuclear Reactor, Coldwater Creek, and so forth. So for the West Lake Landfill, we commented extensively, both the Missouri Coalition for the Environment and Drey, and Concerned Citizens Byron back there, in 2008 about the record of decision that the EPA made that Kay talked about to leave the radioactive waste there. A lot of frustration about that decision led to the EPA re-examining the site and what to do. So one thing that we've had an issue with lately is that in 2008 the EPA based its decision to leave the radioactive waste there on old groundwater information. The Federal EPA has now been involved and is overseeing the site investigation. They asked for new groundwater studies. We've seen an increase in radium in the groundwater, between 3 and 5 times greater concentrations of radium in the groundwater. One thing that's important to note, and this is not disputed science, is that the radioactivity is going to become more radioactive for the next 9,000 years. So the radium has to catch up with very high counts of thorium, both radioactive materials, and until they're in equilibrium over the next 9,000 years, then they'll start to decay through the normal half-life process that Case mentioned earlier. So we're advocating for the removal of the radioactive waste. We believe that's the only surefire way to make sure that it does not further contaminate our area, whether it be from a landfill fire, from a flood. If you've seen any of the maps of the flood of '93, one of the only levees that didn't break in the entire area was the Earth City levee. So when Chesterfield was underwater, they rebuilt that levee. Now you've got a bunch of malls sitting on the best farmland in the world. All that water in the river is going to be pushed downriver towards the West Lake Landfill. So we may not be that lucky over the next 9,000 years to have a 500-year levee stand up to the Missouri River. It's in a seismically active area. It's on top of what's called alluvium soil. So in the event of an earthquake down in New Madrid or anywhere closer between here and there, if it's big enough, it'll turn that soil into liquid. So basically, if you have a house with a foundation and you turn it into liquid, what happens to the house? It's going to sink. Well, we feel that that's what could possibly happen at this landfill if there's a large enough earthquake, and recovering that radioactive waste will be much more difficult after the fact, on top of all the other likely damage to happen from a large earthquake. So the most surefire thing to do is remove the radioactive waste, call your federally elected officials, make sure that they go on the record in support. So far, none of them have gone on the record, whether it's to leave it there or remove it. They're all saying, well, we just need to figure out what the best solution is. The best solution is to have it removed and have it sent to a facility that was licensed by the federal government to handle the type of highly radioactive waste. It's not technically high-level radioactive waste, that's semantics, but it's enough there to cause problems. It's the same stuff that contaminated Coldwater Creek. We've seen a lot of folks who are here tonight who have had personal tragedies in their families and with their friends. And it's the same stuff. It needs to get out. They're doing it in other sites, and they need to do it here at West Lake. Thank you.
What is the address of the Coalition for the Environment? If anybody wants to take this down and join or get on their mailing list? Is that? Yeah. Here we go.
Yeah. So cover your ears, Kay. The Missouri Coalition for the Environment, we were in University City until just recently. We moved to South Grand. Oh, I know. Our address is 3115 South Grand. We're in Suite 650. We've got a cool roof. We've got solar panels on our roof. It's really great. There's a place to hang out up there. We have our annual fundraiser on October 11th. It's going to be at the Alberici building, right off of 170 and Page. It's October 11th. You can get the information on our website. You can sign up for West Lake Landfill email alerts. We have memberships. If you become a member, you get a snazzy MCE t-shirt or a water bottle with your membership. And yeah, follow us on Facebook, Twitter. Go to our website. It's www.moenviron, M-O-E-N-V-I-R-O-N, Moenviron. Environment without the M-E-N-T. I don't know why we did that. .org. Oh yeah, I'll write it over here. All of that stuff. And thank you.
That's a good idea. There's the magic markers. You got to kind of work with them to pull them off there. They'll leave the address here. Yes, sir. You've been wanting to ask a question. You're going to have to come up though. So
perhaps I can talk loudly.
Well, can you hear him in the back? Yes. Don't you just come up for a second, sir? We've tried to get most of your questions. We haven't got them all, but we've got most of them. This is Mr. Cantor.
Hi. Well, it's certainly nice to see this group here of concerned individuals, and we very much appreciate your efforts as well. Number two, I can't believe as a physician that we don't know already, the EPA, the Environmental Protective Agency, how much radioactivity is leaching out into the rivers. And when they say they don't know, my fear is that they know and they're not letting us know. I'm in pediatrics, and as such, I'm very, very concerned about the people living in the close environment. The children going to high school there, it is very, very frightening. And I wonder why we have not filed a lawsuit to bring this to the public's attention in a way that may lead to more effective involvement by our federal government. So that's my question.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. I do know that the Attorney General is looking in this matter. I know that he's negotiating with his Republic. And for that reason, because they're in negotiations, they don't want to comment. I know about that. I've been a lawyer a long time. You really should not comment about things you're negotiating with your opponent. But it wouldn't hurt to write the Attorney General of Missouri regarding this matter too, because it is the primary legal body that represents us. I'll get to you in a minute, ma'am.
No, they just take all of our stuff.
Yeah, we're going to have to ask you to come on up because we can't hear you. Just a second.
This is Beth Prost. She drives from Rolla with Agnes. She drives to all of our meetings. She doesn't even live here. She grew up in Berkeley, but she supports our meetings.
Respectfully, I have to disagree with you about contacting the Attorney General. All of our contacts to him, he's just straight go to DNR. He does not answer any of our stuff. It all goes to DNR, their PR, Larry Lehman. Then he calls back everybody for their responses. So, not a good idea for the Attorney General.
All right, thank you. I did read in the paper though that the Attorney General is negotiating right now with Republic on the fire issue. I know that. I read that in the Lawyers Weekly this week. So I think that's important to point out.
Has Republic been giving money to politicians?
I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt that.
How have they gotten away with it?
We have we just ended up our legislative session, and we even intervened in the middle of a lawsuit regarding Doe Run. The people that have, I mean, take a look at what your representative receives from whom. You know, that's an issue. There's no question about that. You know, that money obviously affects politics. I want to ask Bill, talking about politicians, the next question. The EPA has stated in its public meeting in July that the St. Louis Airport and the FAA do not want the landfill opened or the waste removed. What can local people do to affect that position by the St. Louis City Airport Authority or the EPA?
We got this question, I'm not sure who asked it. I asked Rory to ask me. I'm a retired air traffic controller. I did it for 31 years. I worked at Lambert Airport for 20 years. I worked at Lambert when it was a real airport. The idea that this landfill has any effect on the airport is ludicrous. Believe me, even back in the late 80s and early 90s when we were running 1,600 operations a day, that landfill, if it did attract birds, and it did back then, the birds are generally 100 to 200 foot above and it's not an issue. I've never heard this from the airport, and I'll debate them publicly at any time. There is no effect on this airport whatsoever. The new runways have changed, they're going the other direction. Any departure corridor, and its only departures off this airport, could avoid this landfill. So I don't know where, I know I hear that every once in a while, I don't understand it, and maybe Matt has another point of view.
I don't have a different point of view. I can tell you I've been in meetings with the airport and they have a concern with it, and they've actually, very early on in this project, when the reinforced concrete pipe abatement project started, and that's when, you know, we were looking at evacuation details and things like that. They submitted a letter to Republic that I was fortunate enough to get a copy of, basically threatening them with a lawsuit to cease and desist any work that they were doing on the landfill. In the meeting that I had with the airport, they made the claim that it's an FAA requirement of within 10,000 feet of the end of a runway, blah, 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 blah. What I think, at least I was able to emphasize with their attorneys and everything else, was the fact that their concern is birds. Waterfowl in particular would become an issue with the leachate pond that they created behind there, and I know that they're going to have issues when they talk about digging into the waste, or possibly digging into the waste. And the first thing I want to add that I didn't mention earlier, the fire district is in support of the barrier wall as long as it's safe to construct it. And that has to be done with gamma pentometer penetration probes to test, first off, for radioactive material where they're talking about building the wall, and secondly, what I've been told by EPA, and I know what the feelings are about government agencies, it's obvious in this room, that phase 2 of that, if those readings are abnormal, normal, whatever they are, and those two, I believe, are going to be made public to us. I made that comment on Facebook last week that nothing's been held from us to this point, so I don't see why they would, and if they do, I think we should all throw up the red flag, question what those results are going to be. But when they do that, phase 2 of that is going to be core sampling. So those are some things, and I want to add to the comment about the Attorney General. Republic tried to propose this barrier wall several weeks ago, and I was told that there were two very high ups at DNR that were going to the Lake of the Ozarks to meet with Attorney General Koster while he was on vacation, and they were going to change his mind. We didn't hear anything the next couple of days because, as we found out, he didn't change his mind. He stood his ground to make sure that the safety compliance was still in effect with the plan that they submitted. I'm non-partisan in this issue, but I will tell you that your Attorney General on that issue looked out for the best people, for the community's best interest. He didn't just sign off on throwing in a barrier wall without the safety constraints around it. So that, you know, that was something that I felt he did for this community.
Bill wants to finish up. Don, did you want to add something too?
I said, yeah, they want to do all these testings and stuff like that, but guess what? They got to get background first, okay?
Okay.
The original plan wasn't even to do that.
Bill, and then Kay.
Yeah, just to finish up though, I've got a lot of experience at Lambert Airport. There is no, especially with the traffic load nowadays, there's no reason whatsoever that the airport should have any concern with anything there. Believe me, we're running Des Moines, Iowa airport traffic now. We're not running high-level traffic anymore.
And the airport didn't complain when they tore down a big hunk of Bridgeton near the airport. They didn't worry about those birds. But what we haven't said tonight, and I think is maybe the most important thing of all, and it would be great if you would just choose to write one letter, and I don't care what, even write to these gentlemen. We need to say that we need the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to take over as soon as possible the West Lake radioactive waste. The Corps of Engineers has been cleaning up all our St. Louis sites. Downtown Mallinckrodt, the airport, well, they didn't do the airport site actually, downtown Mallinckrodt, Laddie Avenue, 100 sites in St. Louis County that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has taken over. They have people in, these are our federal engineers. They have people who know about munitions. They have people who know about explosions. And they have people here who've been trained to dig up these identical radioactive wastes in sites all over St. Louis City and County. And they are the only people we can hope that this can be done safely. I mean, it's very frightening to think that anybody other than somebody with the Corps of Engineers would go out with a shovel at West Lake Landfill. And it's very important, please, and you know, I've been involved in more lawsuits against the Corps of Engineers than I care to think about. I mean, they don't do everything right, and the Post-Dispatch had a huge article about an embarrassment recently about the Corps. But I asked the woman who's head of the cleanup here for downtown Mallinckrodt and all our other 100 sites in St. Louis County and City, what would you do if we could possibly get the West Lake Landfill transferred from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency that wanted to put some junk on top and leave all the waste there? What would you do? And Sharon Contner said she would call people at the Corps who know about munitions and explosives and all kinds of other things. We have experts in this country. They are the ones who should be taking the responsibility for cleaning it up. And another thing I guess I would say is that we did have a vote. The U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission wanted to leave huge bunches of the same extremely dangerous Mallinckrodt waste at the St. Louis Airport, 22-acre tract. And we put a vote on the ballot in St. Louis City and St. Louis County saying, do you want to have a big 22-acre dump at the St. Louis Airport? And over 80% of the people in the city of St. Louis and over 80% of the people in the county of St. Louis County said they did not want a permanent dump at the airport. And I think if we ask them to vote, do you want a permanent dump at West Lake Landfill in the Missouri River floodplain upstream from our drinking water, I think they'll say no.
I have a question, and then after the answer to that comes, we're going to let each of our panelists take 1 or 2 minutes to wrap up. We will be here later until about 9. We don't have to close the doors. But my question is, and I was under the impression that, like at Callaway, they store their nuclear waste, and I believe our president is involved in helping to make decisions in this area. I mean, like everybody is involved. Is one of the problems we have is that we don't have any safe place to take nuclear waste, because nobody has agreed to take it. The Nevada deal, whatever the Nevada deal looks like it was going to happen, that's fallen through, and so all the nuclear power plants are storing their stuff. Are we kind of coming up against that, too, in that, well, you have to keep it, because we haven't decided where the final depository is. You haven't spoken. Oh, we'll just start with you, Tom. You want to just try to answer that, or does anybody else want to take a stab at that?
Stop creating it. You don't have nuclear power plants creating more and more waste. There is no place, no safe place on the planet Earth for these materials. No safe place.
But is that part of the problem? They won't take it somewhere because there is no place to take it.
They've been sending the materials from St. Louis out to Utah or to Idaho, and it's not that that's great, but they have isolated these materials as well as we can do that. And that's where they're sending, that's where the Corps of Engineers is sending all this stuff, and that's why it's so important to make the point. The Corps of Engineers has been here now working on these materials for a long time, but they're only going to be here for a couple more years. They have trained people, they have equipment, they have knowledge, they have engineers, and we need them, and we don't want them to leave St. Louis and leave the radioactive waste behind.
Don, we're going to start with you. If you want to make a response to that, then make a closing comment. A closing comment will work down the line, and in that we'll do it for the formal evening today.
I just wanted to say that I'm not qualified to say whether that's part of the issue of why nobody wants to move this stuff. But I would think that in regards to nuclear power, especially Ameren, you would have these places advocating for the removal of West Lake Landfill just because it is the world's oldest nuclear weapons waste. How do you justify creating more of it when you haven't cleaned up the first cupful of it ever created? I guess I just want to close and say, you know, if you guys want to help, we could use your help. We really could. Our community's in trouble, and frankly, if you live even this far out, you're in trouble too. It affects you. We have cards on the table that have our Facebook page, West Lake Landfill. We also have a website now, STL Rad Waste Legacy. We have a CAG group that is formed, and we have people here from Coldwater Creek, Just the Facts. Really quickly, I do want to touch on Coldwater Creek. I gotta tell you, be watching the news, people, because maps are going to be coming out and it's going to absolutely floor St. Louis. Something terrible happened. We, like Kay has been saying, were irresponsible. The people that created this waste were irresponsible. Either they didn't know, they did, who cares? It happened. It got out into the public. It got out at I'm going to get choked up, North St. Louis County, when it sat out on Laddie Avenue. There were mountains of this stuff. And this stuff was so fine, it was finer than powdered sugar. And when the wind blew, it blew all over North County. It leaked into the creek. Kids played in that creek. Kids ate crawdads out. Dads took their kids playing on the ball fields right next to this. These people are coming forward now with horrendous cancers. This is a curse. This is a legacy issue that St. Louis has right now. And let me tell you, there's nothing you can do to help those people. Those people have to suffer, and their children have to suffer. But the people at West Lake Landfill, there's something you can do right now. You can help us get this waste out right now.
I guess in closing, I would just say that this is still a new topic for me personally, but it's something that I'm very concerned about and the county is very concerned about. I'm one of those North County kids. I grew up in Florissant. I grew up playing in Coldwater Creek, actually. And like most people, I mean, we didn't know. I didn't know most of what I know till about 2 months ago, I suppose. So we are very concerned about it. We're not trying to be alarmist about it, but it is a big issue. It's something that needs more analysis. It's something that clearly hasn't been addressed properly, as Dawn has pointed out. But it does impact all of us. And like I said, I feel like I have a personal connection to this story. And we're going to do our best to address it. Thank you.
I just want to say in closing that you guys are the power. The fire district isn't. State Rep Otto isn't. Mr. Ellinger is not. It's the community. I've heard that up and down the board. I've gone out and sought people who had these issues in their communities, in Ohio, in Tennessee, with Todd. He's never seen a community come together like this one has, and I think that has a lot to say about St. Louisans. I really do. We always get behind each other. It's my job to look out for the community. I feel that I've tried to do that as best as I can, not making myself knowledgeable of the situation, but the community is the one that has the power. The power is in the numbers, and it's all one voice. Thank you.
And I hope you realize that none of us would know about the fire at Westlake if it weren't for this gentleman right here. He brought it to the attention of the public. He alone, so he's one of my heroes. And I hope that we really do need to move in a hurry because this is frightening. And Republic should not be making the decisions. It should be the Corps of Engineers.
I think the only thing I can add is I'd like to thank Rory, Representative Ellinger, for holding this panel tonight, his wife Linda, and the panel, Dawn, Tom, Matt, Kay. I certainly appreciate their efforts. I'm so happy with Rory that he was able to do this. By the way, I said I was a 57-year-old freshman. Apparently he was a 69-year-old freshman. Oh. When he first got elected. Think about that. That hurt. Well, it's better not being a freshman at all. What I would ask you all to do is that, and Matt said it, it's been said here several times, but if each and every one of you went home tonight or tomorrow and emailed Senator Blunt, McCaskill, Congresswoman Wagner, and Congressman Clay, each send an email. If they got 100 emails tomorrow, tonight and tomorrow on this issue, each one of them, it will bring it that much more to their attention. You'd be surprised how few emails they get on specific issues related to a problem we have right here in St. Louis. We have, I will commend both offices, they have sat through two 3-hour presentations, they've listened, but it is up to you, as much noise as I might make, they just say, I'm some politician trying to get reelected. But the fact is, it's up to you. And if you can email, and then when you get an answer, thank them and email them another question. If you email them once, you get one answer, then you email them twice. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Kay, I would like Kay in the last word.
Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to say I don't think I personally thanked Dawn Chapman enough, because this young woman at the end of the table has spent around the clock with 3 little tiny children. She has really been heroic.
Just want to make an announcement. County Councilwoman Hazel Irby couldn't be with us tonight. We're going to be co-hosting an event called North County Economic Development sometime in November. I just want to make that announcement now, so when you get the notice later, I hope we get as many people out for that. This is a really important topic. I thought at first, should I have it? You know, is this alarmist? I think, though, that we have some really solid data that has been presented here. And that's the role of your public officials, is to attempt to address public policy. And that's what we were doing tonight. We were talking about public policy. We want a safe, radioactive free environment for ourselves, for our children, and for our grandchildren. And that note, we will close, and thank you for coming.